You're in order for opening comments.
Which is short. This bill prohibits the requirement of a COVID-19 vaccination for enrollment in any licensed child care, K-12 school, or post-secondary school. It defines post-secondary school as regents or community colleges. That'd be my opening comments.
Are there any questions? Senator Bolkcom, you're in order.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this bill seems to be targeting one private college in Iowa, Grinnell College, which I think is the only institution in our state that's a college. It's enumerated in the bill. We don't have any K-12 systems, no private schools, no community colleges, no public universities that are requiring COVID-19 vaccinations, a safe, effective vaccine that nearly, 1.9 million Iowans have taken advantage of. Mr. Chairman, this legislation, I think, is dangerous. It continues to erode public confidence in safe, effective vaccinations for things like mumps, measles, rubella, polio, whooping cough, diphtheria, those vaccinations that probably everybody on this side of the table got when we were children and didn't think twice about it because our doctor said, you should get these for our parents were told these are good things to get because they reduce death and illness among our kids. This past weekend, the Des Moines Register had a poll that found that public confidence is eroding in our childhood vaccinations. I know we're talking about COVID-19 today because you all are a bit obsessed about this. We've turned this into a political issue, what's been determined by science to be effective and safe. But here we are with this bill, mostly to make political points. But this poll this weekend said that 28% of Iowans now say that the state should have no laws on whether kids are vaccinated for polio, mumps, diphtheria, whooping cough. 14% of Iowans said, I should be able to decide whether my kid gets vaccinated for polio, diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, mumps. And I think that's a dangerous place to be, to see the confidence, and 42% of Iowans are ready to chuck childhood vaccinations. And when we do that, we make every kid, every teacher, in every classroom, in every child care setting, more susceptible to preventable diseases. Now, I don't know when science flew out the window here. I get we've got this political fight over COVID-19. By the way, 2 years ago today, we closed the legislature down because of this pandemic that was hitting Iowa. 2 years ago today. So I don't know why we're allowing these anti-science, anti-public health zealots make everybody unsafe in Iowa. The trend is terrible. We right now have reduced rates of vaccinations for these very vaccinations today because the anti-vaccination people have put in people's minds that all vaccinations suddenly are a problem. And I just think that it's going to be bad for our kids. It's going to be bad for people that work in child care settings, in our schools. I don't get it. It's time for you guys to give up on this. This is not about, this is about making political points. It's not about keeping people safe. These vaccinations for childhood issues are safe and effective, as well as COVID-19. And here we are. And then the second point I make is, why are we telling private businesses what to do? Right? You guys are the pro-business people. Business knows what's best for business. Why are we telling businesses what to do? Mr. Chairman, this is a terrible bill. We should vote it down. Thank you.
Senator Peterson, Senator Bisignano, you are in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't go much further than what Senator Bolkcom said because it's where I wanted to go, more on the private sector, the child care centers. I don't understand. I mean, either I'm schizophrenic or you are, but every subcommittee or committee I go to, either dealing with freedom or we're dealing with mandates. And I don't know what world we're in here. I start moving towards freedom a little bit, and then I get shoved back to nanny. And I don't understand why this specifically. Because if I had another business that I catered to kids and I chose to have vaccination to get in, this wouldn't outlaw that. Because it wouldn't be a daycare center. It'd be a recreational area. So why we've honed in on a daycare center that's a private business. Now, public sector, that's different. You want to deal with the schools, I don't agree with you. But I certainly understand the difference between private rights, as we've tried to espouse here for businesses and so forth, not to have mandates, and then here we are. So you can't have it both ways here. I mean, you either have a philosophy that you agree with and you move forward because you're in the majority, but when you stop and reverse on the direction we're going with in general of freedoms and private sector rights, private property rights, all these different issues that we're dealing with, this makes no sense. And I think, this is definitely one of those bills that, step back and realize what you're doing. Somebody picked 2029. What'd that mean? Yeah, 2029. Is something going to happen in 2029 that all at once we're going to say, okay, now that doesn't apply anymore? Are we going to find a new vaccination? I mean, there's a new strain of COVID now in China. It's down low, but it's, once they come up, it's just like with the bird flu. I mean, they spreads. But you got to decide, either you're going to allow business to operate as their own business or they're not. You can't have it both ways. So, I don't know. I'm going to oppose the bill, but I do think that the contradiction is getting very hard to follow from bill to bill and from committee to committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any other questions? Senator Taylor, you're in order.
Thank you. I would say one reason that this is different with the COVID vaccine in comparison to the mumps and the measles and the chicken pox and the German measles or rubella of my childhood is that those viruses, those diseases specifically targeted children. Those were childhood diseases. I'm old enough that there were not vaccines at the time when I was, 3 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And so I went through all of those things. I'm thankful that vaccines, safe, effective vaccines, were developed for those. But those have been in circulation for decades now, right? We're 50, 60 years for some of them. It is different with the COVID vaccines. I think generally speaking, they may be safe, but we know that they're not necessarily safe for everyone. And so I think partly we have to look at the risk. What are pre-existing conditions? And the risk of a child contracting COVID, for the vast majority, I would say from what I've read, it's over 90%, they are at very little risk, not only of being seriously ill, they're usually asymptomatic to where if you don't test them, you don't even know that they have COVID. And partly because they're asymptomatic, that is a sign that they do not spread. The risk of an adult contracting COVID from a child is infinitesimally small. Now that is part of the science. So I think part of the pushback that we are seeing in the polls, it isn't a result of propaganda or over-the-top demonization of the COVID vaccines by people who are skeptical. I think a lot of it is overreach by the government. They did not know when to stop. They won't look at the data and see, well, who is actually at risk of COVID. It is targeted to a specific age group, to people who have pre-existing conditions, and we know what those conditions are. It's not some surprise. And so I guess I look at this a little bit differently from my Democratic colleagues, that I feel like this is overreach, especially in the public school sector, of trying to force something on the children of Iowans when they should have the right to say no. This is something that is relatively new, and speaking of business, partly I think resistance to the COVID vaccine, right or wrong, I think comes out of the recognition that there is collusion between the private sector of Pfizer and these giant corporations who are in the business to make money. That's their number one goal. And when they collude with the CDC and the FDA, it's this unholy alliance, which is nothing new. Progressives used to be concerned about this when it happens in Washington, but now we're supposed to turn a blind eye to it and assume that the federal government is always objective and they're immune from these economic pressures. They're not. And so I think that's part of the pushback by Iowans. And maybe it's gone too far, but I think it's a little more complicated than just blaming the people who are skeptical or wary of having these vaccines forced on our children. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Senator Peterson, do you have your hand up? No. Okay. Senator Bolkcom, you do. You're in order.
Not sorry for a second time. I appreciate the point, Senator Taylor. You got your childhood vaccinations and you believed in them, I think is what you said. You complied with the government and you agreed with that, right?
Are you asking?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not. And we all did. I mean, I would submit, raise your hand if you didn't get childhood vaccinations on this side of the table. Bills like this, while the subject matter is COVID and whether or not somebody in a daycare, a youngster, as you point out, whether they get vaccinated or not, that's the issue of the bill. What I'm saying is that bills like this and the work of the anti-vax folks have eroded confidence in parents getting their kids vaccinated for the things we have all been vaccinated for. And the rates are down, and look, this polling says that parents today, and these numbers have shifted, the erosion in confidence in parents getting their kids vaccinated with these childhood vaccinations is troubling. That's my point. And you know, you're spreading misinformation, Senator Taylor, about the collusion between the drug companies and the government is like the Fox News talking point on that, just to point that out. But I think it's pretty clear. This poll of Iowans about this important topic shows that confidence is down in things that we should have high confidence in the effectiveness of these vaccines. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other questions or comments? There being none, Senator, you're in order for closing comments.
Well, thank you. This has been interesting, and I'm sure we'll do this again on the floor. So I'm going to be a little bit less verbose. But ladies and gentlemen, this simply, I guess I should start. I don't know who was targeted by this because it came from the House. But what it does do is protect the rights of Iowans, parents and children, to make the decision for themselves in an atmosphere in which it's been proven children are at practically no risk currently. You find that out in every large public gathering where adults have just quit wearing masks because they know it's useless. I would add, just so that it's not the point isn't left hanging out there and they think there's no answer. This bill actually does address, in my mind, the diminishing confidence in vaccines, because we need to put to rest that the COVID vaccine is an effective and safe vaccine. It is an attempt that didn't work. So when it didn't work the first time, numbers didn't change regardless. States that required the vaccine went up, and states that didn't require the vaccine went up. I don't even believe there was any correlation. I think it's ineffective, and what was so eloquently called a first booster was actually just a second attempt, which you have to call experimental because they didn't have any idea if it would work or not. The reason I know they didn't know if it would work or not is because suddenly we came with the eloquently named second booster, which was actually the third attempt. Now we're supposed to take the next booster, which is another attempt. They keep trying to do things. It doesn't work. These things are not effective. The children are not at risk in the first place. And I think that is pretty well accepted, because the comeback, when you say that children are at almost no risk, the comeback is, well, what about their grandparents? Well, folks, that's conceding that children are not at risk. We should not be damaging children by telling them they cannot go to daycare, to K-12 school, to secondary education, based on the political beliefs of authoritarians who want to force their belief in well, it's not science. Their belief in just the hive mindset. I move this bill because we have to move past this, and we have to get past the semi-quasi science clergy who have turned what used to be a respected industry, the science industry, into more of a club to beat people over the head. I move the bill.
Short form has been requested. All in favor say aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, I assume that you're all going to want to be recorded that way. So Senator Kinney, no. Senator Bolton, no. Senator Bolkcom, no. Senator Peterson, no. Senator Bisignano, no.